Well, we've been spending a lot of time talking about this area of Neptune's Lagoon here in the Mediterranean for a while now, but here's a new article that came out here December 23rd of 2020. I don't know when you're watching this, but this was current then. As a massive tsunami hit the Neolithic Middle East 9,000 plus years ago. Study may explain why previous archaeological surveys have found no evidence until the late Neolithic for low-lying coastal villages at Tel Dor, Israel. So when we see this picture that's right here, Tel Dor, Israel is the area we're looking at, and there's these escarpments that are out onto it, and it looks like it'd just be fantastic to use, but yet they found no sites there. People tried to look for it, and they said, well, don't know why there's nothing that's there. But one have to realize that once we've done all this, that now we realize that the ocean was quite a bit lower at that time. So in fact, this would have been a higher ground area at the time. And in fact, it goes for quite a few hundreds of yards out as to where the ancient coastline would have been in ancient times that we're talking about. So this is quite a bit inland still, even though it's actually just a most beautiful point probably to get out on and take pictures and look at in these beaches that are here that you see in front of you. But at one time, thousands of years ago, albeit a little over 9,000 years ago, pinpointing that end of the Younger Dryas area timeline, there was a devastation that ran a tidal wave across this land that you're looking at. It's extremely high and ran inland quite a bit. And I don't think in the figuring they're figuring out the fact that, well, whenever they're talking about this, it did do so and come in some 2.5 miles or more in places, depending on the way it runs. But also, it started way out there, because that's where the coastline was that would have been inundated through this point and on. So whenever they found that this got done, this was the higher ground in this area at this time, and it got taken too. Well, they say, no, this wasn't Noah's flood, but it still had a catastrophic event that profoundly changed the landscape and could have given rise to legends, too. According to a new study from an international team of researchers, a massive tsunami swept over the coastline near Tel Dor, Israel, sometime between 9910 and 9290 years ago. So now we're dating it right around that 7200 BC pinpoint, where recently we were looking at another site where not too far from here, they had found it whenever they were building a interstate type road of, what was it, 77 and 79 there in the convergence of it, and found this ancient site, which has the world's oldest known concrete at this time shown there. And so how does concrete go back? How late does it go back? It's another video. Check my site here, it's in it. It's recent. I'm going to put out these close to each other with a few flivers in between. The date makes it the oldest known paleo tsunami in the eastern Mediterranean, though. All other ones were kind of taken away from the wet that had happened before it. And then, of course, we have the ice age that was going on, which pressured everything much more down into the Mediterranean area, which is, of course, known as Mediterranean, but that means Middle Earth terrain, terra, terra. Yeah, it's the middle of Earth. Published in the Open Access Journal Plus One, the paper by Gilad Shanahan and Richard Norris and Thomas Levi from the University of California, San Diego, with colleagues from Utah State University and the University of Haifa in Israel. There is a part of an ongoing long-term project between UC San Diego's Scripps Center for Marine Archaeology, so the Scripps Institute, and Haifa's Leon Rekanati Institute for Maritime Studies. Directed by paper co-author Asaf Ur-Landau, to investigate how humans have, over the past 12 millennia, 12,000 years, adapted to climate and environmental change along Israel's Carmel coast. Just like they are at UC San Diego, if you go north of that, there'd be Carmel, California. So many places are named for ancient places, and even in the New World, if you will, with things like Memphis, and man, you could go into a series of them. But so this right here, what is this? Well, this is a drilling rig that drills sediment cores. It puts pipes that are thin and have a hole into them, and much like a core drilling type device, it goes down and takes chunks out of the earth in, I believe, 10-foot sections. And so they went down basically 30 foot in this area, and they were supposed to be getting climate information so they could use it. And of course, some people would use that climate information in all kinds of weird ways. But what we're finding out, of course, is that there was a whole lot of catastrophe going on that people don't want to mention, and where its pinpoints in time were, and then that's correlation to, of course, mythologies and things, and even things that are shown and stated later in religion, which a lot of that comes from mythologies, as I've shown in so many videos. Let's just continue. The researchers discover evidence for the tsunami by cutting open sediment cores from the coastal study area, the South Bay at Tel Dor. In these samples, they found an abrupt layer of seashells and sand dated to between 9910 and 9290 years ago. In the middle wetland, layers deposited 15,000 to 7,800 years ago. So it was this layer that dated to running through till that time, and then all of a sudden 7,800 years ago, wow, well, what's here? There's all this marine sediment and shells and so on, and they're showing you right here, and they're doing it on the beach to find it there, but they found it much farther inland also. They're about to tell you the extent that they found it too at this point, but it doesn't affect just this little bay, which again looks like Neptune's Lagoon. No, it doesn't affect that. Mediterranean was all Neptune's Lagoon. In fact, he was the king of Atlantis, so it actually comes out to the Atlantic. But let's not go there necessarily in this video. It affected many places, and so people have put out models, if you will, of something having had happened a few thousand yards offshore, which would have been a few hundred yards offshore back in ancient times, and so it happening and so on. Some other people that I've seen talking about this actually state that it wouldn't have happened there because there wasn't there at that time, and so indicating that there was this difference. But also what they would be talking about is the shelf where it did fall off at this time, so after and past the beach, and how it was a mudslide out off of it and a backwash. But that other information from other sites, much like way over in the next bay and the next bay and the next bay, and if you went right of here, the next bay and the next bay, says it couldn't have been right there localized, although there's a massive push in this area for its lowland effect and the way it runs through the mountains. It could have been something that happened much farther out, much like the Santorini type of event, but that would have been much thousands of years later. But something along that line, or an echo that came across from a farther point, let's just say. The only way that this marine sediment, though, that they're going and showing you this dating on, could have arrived so far inland, or what would have been inland at the time, the authors determined, was thought to be a destructive wave. They estimate that the wave capable of doing this would have traveled inland between 1.5 and 3.5 kilometers in certain areas that they found so far, which is about 1 to 2 miles, and it would have been between 16 and 40 meters high at the coastline where they're standing there now. And that correlates to at least 50 foot, 52 to 130 foot high. I'm not sure if they're figuring there because they do make the mention of the coastline being far out. So way out there, it would have been 130 foot high to have been able to make it in past the point that they are now and come some 2 miles inland at other sites that they're showing. That's the way I understand it. Tsunamis are not uncommon in the eastern Mediterranean. Historical records and geographic data suggest that a tsunami has been occurring about once every century for the past 6,000 years. For comparison, however, previously documented tsunami events have traveled inland only around 300 meters, or for about 1,000 feet. In other words, this Neolithic event was significant. The authors suspect a strong earthquake on the Dead Sea Fault system was followed by an underwater landslide. Now, this would have been the coastal idea, and the fact that the coast just went into the water, kind of like the Alexandrian event, but because it all happened at once, like pretty much the whole mountain range here went submerged all of a sudden, it would have sucked under like if you put your hand on the surface and then pull down real quick in water or pool, how it'll pull and then go whoop. And that's kind of the model they're showing. Other models say that it might have been a little bigger, a little out farther, or something different about it. There's at least a discrepancy between a few of these people talking about it at this point. But then again, this has just come out this December, and I'm sure they don't even want anybody to talk different things. So you see this cores that are laid out here. It looks like a stick with dirty on the left end of it, but this is cores where they dug down, and what he's showing you there in that little spot there that they find in that core is a band that it's going along with certain types of sediment and sand and everything. Then all of a sudden there's this inundation of what is this all of a sudden showing up here. And is it real local? Well, no, they found it in all these different places. In fact, they've got a little video they'll show a piece of, and I'll try to clip through it a little bit so it doesn't get marked. But if there was a village at the site, this tsunami would have definitely devastated it and destroyed croplands, pastures, and herds, as well as near-shore marine fisheries and resources. Anybody living near the coast at the time that this thing happened would have been inundated, washed away, and then sucked back in the ocean. And you talk about, well, yeah, like the one that happened off Sumatra or the one that happened off of Japan. No, by the time that's hitting and going through there, that was really only 25 foot. And you can see the amazing amount that it did to them in a one-shot bam. Well, a few successive lurches, if you will, but washing people in and doing things like that. You can imagine that the modern hotels and things made it through a lot of it, but other ones, and of course the first levels, everything's just devastated, washed away, and then sucked back out in the ocean is a bunch of trash. What would have happened to ancient cultures in the way that we know that they lived in their houses and huts and tents and things like that, just washed away and gone. The people that were running away, looks like it would have caught just about almost anybody. You would have been a real lucky bastard if you would have been the dude that would have had a boat that would have made it through this. Ancient mythologies talk about a lot of different floods and situations, and of course, because of this area, the one of Deucalion of the Greeks comes to mind, but it would destroy all the croplands, pastures, and herds, as well as shore, marine fisheries, and resources. People have quite often wondered, how does the Dead Sea get to the point that it's trapped and got this seawater or salt water inundated to the point that certain rivers that are running here and puddles that are there are now still saltwater inundated. Places like Salt Lake, Utah, and how does that form? Well, sometimes tsunamis washed in far enough to inundate things. Other situations went on with, like, the Black Sea area, where at the Bosphorus, that was fresh water and everything else, but the Mediterranean, as it rose here after this point, rather rapidly inundated and washed in around the Black Sea area, raising it up and again taking people away in another flood that's well known, as well as the Sumerian flood that's recorded in the Bible that was done by the rivers having a massive flood. But because Neolithic cultures all had floods, it looks like a lot of that is going back to commonalities of situations like this. This event, which occurred during the early to middle Neolithic culture periods of the region, might explain why previous archaeological surveys have come up with nothing pretty much and found no evidence for low-lying coastal villages. Well, in that particular area until the late Neolithic, and the researchers said the evidence for earlier settlement may have been wiped out. Well, first of all, if they were real coastal, that's no longer on the coast anymore. You're going to have to go scuba diving to see where somebody would have been if they were on the coast, where everybody still is today and living around rivers and things like that. That's why this flood thing happened to so many people. It's pretty easily to discern that. But now when we're looking at these areas that are not even on the coast, that it got inundated by miles from back whenever the coast was way farther out there, that shows you that this event was a little bit of a standout. We can at least say that. We can't know for sure why people weren't living there in a place otherwise abundant with evidence of early human habitation and the beginnings of village life in the Holy Land area, said Levi, the paper's senior author, co-director of UC San Diego's SCMA, and an archaeological professor in the university's Department of Anthropology. So, yeah, he's got some cred going here. Was the environment too altered to support life right after that? Was the tsunami part of their cultural knowledge? Did they tell stories of this destructive event and stay away? We can only imagine. Well, no, but you can do that. But then you can also find Greek stories where they tell you about situations like this that had happened in apparently near Carthage in the African coast, where the people there had salt on the ground. Well, a lot of that was where they were apparently letting water inland to a little small thin pond that was pretty big and then choking it back off and then letting it dehydrate out, and then they were making up salt for use and for trade and things like that. But also, that area had been inundated so bad, they all record this story about it was kind of salty and crackled up earth, and the salt had gone to it. Things didn't grow, and there was a people that were near there that had apparently not just tilled it under, which would have made sense. They actually put other soil from another place on top of that and were trying to grow out of that situation. There's a lot of other ones, and then, of course, where does the pillar of salt that Lot's wife turns into come from? By the late pottery Neolithic period, however, archaeological sites along the coast begin to reappear and coincide with the resumption of wetland deposits in the core samples from Dor, indicating resettlement and highlighting, Levi said, people's resilience in the face of massive disruption. So here we're looking at a picture of a little YouTube video they're going to show here. They're lined up with north, it's here. And so this little lagoon, I don't know what little bitty ripple that this is on this chain here, but notice that the pink that they're showing here, well, that's where the water is sucked out before this wave comes in, and it looks like something hit way the hell out here in relation to the model. but I don't think they're showing the current model. And you have this little pool that's here that's inundated with salt water. Well, let's look at this little video here for just a second, see if it'll load. So they've done this diving, and I'm not going to put it out there, the whole thing. They've done this diving. Man, you ought to see this Hidden in Sacred Numbers by Randall Carlson. That's right there. Hidden Mathematics. Yeah, I did a recent series on sacred geometry and so on, but he puts it together in a different way. I call him Santa Zeus because he pretty much looks like Santa Zeus and is really has quite the way of teaching somebody something. The reason you can tell this is in 2020, at the end of 2020, right in December here in the holidays, is that this man's wearing a mask, and even though he's more than 15 foot away from anybody that's even in here, he decides to wear a mask on camera to show his faithfulness and so on. That goes with this idea. For whenever he starts to talk to these other guys that are around here, the picture behind him is showing you the sights a little bit, but we'll get into that a little more. Is so far away from him, they shouldn't have to wear it at all. Of course, they're on video. Why would you wear one on video? And the guy that is in the background on the right, of course, is not wearing one. But you can imagine that there are times whenever that person would be doing it somehow. How hilarious, but this shows you that this was 2020 whenever this was being found here and shown. And so when we're looking at this, if I get a little pointer, and of course this is small, beg your forgiveness here, but on the coast, that little dot there is where this is happening, and they're believing something happened way the hell out here that caused the whole inundation to it. And as we go through it, here is the bay that they were at, and doing their archaeology, and apparently that drill was probably on this one because you could see the palms across the way and everything. I don't think it was this angle, but I bet it was that one exactly. But they've done these here that are showing you this. Now in this picture though, note that whenever they're showing you this, there are all these archaeological sites that are right off the coast that are people where they're living at. So when they say nobody, they mean a whole lot. There's Neve Yam for one of them that's famous, but regardless of that, all of these sites are just off the coast. And Dora that we're looking at is right here. But in this showing here, the ancient coastline was not here where it is currently now, with all these sites just off the coast that are still in shallow water that's barely getting any bit depth, because right out here where it does fall off totally, you can see that dotted line, and that dotted line is the coastline of the time. So very much different. Now, all these little purple dots that are shown in here are definitely what they call Natufian sites. And so correlated with them, whereas a lot of the other sites are not necessarily correlated with those, for they go back to different ages and so on through there. The Natufian wave can be shown coming through there also. But notice how far out that's happening. And if you'll notice, all these arrows coming, and it says submerged, submarine, landslide scars. So if this would have been kind of high above it, like a lot of the California coast looks today. Imagine we're talking about an area near Carmel, but Carmel, California, and Pebble Beach and stuff, where there's a little escarpment there that's going on where the ocean was, and that a whole piece of that large portion here let loose at one time and cause a backwash that comes over the land. They do these core drillings and so on. He's telling you about it. I'll try to put a link in here, but I never do that anymore. I'm so tired of links. Here it is again, and it's close to Caesarea. And so it's known as Tel Dor, and they go into little stories about how they went to different whenever he went to the institute, and of course it's off the California coast and all woo whenever you go to it, and he got to talk to these people and his lab coats going on and all this situation. But here we're looking at different aspects of that core that runs through there, and what you're noticing here in this part is this little inundation that's happening at this one point. And that wouldn't mean so much if it wasn't full of shells and marine matter, and the fact that not only is this far inland that, hey, that would have been something pretty big, huh? To the point that, well, no, at the time that this dates to, the coastline was so far out that this was huge, and you check farther inland and it ends up going over 2 miles inland in places. And that's, of course, because of the higher ground that's there. And this Teldor situation, which would have been higher ground, well inland, but still able to see the sea, would have seen this coming. And this huge wave that came in and just wiped everybody out for a couple of miles, pretty much down the entire coastline. In these lines that you see here, there's that same disruption. Here you can see like Charlie Brown's little zigzag in his shirt. Here's the interruption. Here's the interruption. Well, what's this extra sand here? Well, now in the desert and everything happening, that's not one way that we can date it all the way back. Also, the plant life and changes of things. And so different ones are meaning different scales, but always there's this break here. There's this situation here, and they're showing you here, and there's this break here, and then it goes again. So here they are cutting one of those cores open and then going to take a look at it and so on. And so one way to look at this also is the fact that this was way out here in the ocean past him here, and whenever it hit land, it was so tall that it rushed over in the higher ground and all the way in miles inland on that type situation. And because that inundation of those sediments and exactly the type of snails and everything and shells that they found, like this, and the quartz grains and size off of it, that actually means that the ancient beach, like in California, that's a little bit down, but it's out there, had been taken up in a big swallow of a giant tsunami that first sucked out real big, so people could all go out like, what's going on, and find starfish and flopping fish and all things going on. But then all of a sudden you don't want to be in that situation like you saw with the tsunami here that happened before, because whoosh, none of those people that were out there playing in that apparently lived through that situation, because here comes twice as big as it sucked out. What caused it to suck out? This situation going on here, and it inundated the land to quite some point here. So here's a little, I'll try to do the animation part of it here and see if I can get it to kick. So you see it get to that point here, and it actually sucks out, and all of that pink land would have been at the time underwater, and it sucks out all the way to there to pink, and you even see some red, which is hundreds of foot deep of water. But what's coming over the top of it is some 130-meter tall, or what was the exact height they gave of the, between 52 feet tall and much higher, because that's what it would take for it to wash inland. And if you watch right now as it comes inland, how it takes over that area that's there. Boom. And you can see the orange that shows up back and forth. So now the current peak area, and again you see it, huge wave, sucks in and then picks up the beaches and throws it inland. Now the problem I'm having a little bit with this model that they're showing here is that the distance between here and here is a little bit greater than they're showing here, and they're not showing you with a perspective of the coastline that's out here, and the fact that everything that would have been here and the thing would have sucked out there and then gone whoa and hit it here. There aren't mountains just right there on the coastline. There's a ridge here, and don't confuse those with these mountains that are up here and so on, but it pulls out, and this orange you can see to a depth. Imagine if you were standing here on one of these peaks, if you were somewhere luckily in this green area and saw it suck out for how far in these areas here, hundreds and hundreds of yards, it just sucked the whole ocean out, and then you saw a wave that's towering above you coming inland. And in this video that's not showing you these lower and higher areas and how it came in and washed through and went through a whole area, it's just kind of showing you a basic splash. But this is also just on that little point of land. Whenever they do the animation, you see that echo in every different direction. So I'm sure there are some showings of where it happened before, but then again, that's if it didn't go far enough like this one, it's actually up under you as the beach, which would have not nowhere been the beach of ancient times. It would have been much farther out. And so anything in any civilization that had some structures and things going on are, again, way below water. But also they had been washed over and scoured and whipped and beaten apart and then sucked back over again. And then after that time, the ocean rose enough to where any of that crap that was all destroyed like that is trapped under the ocean. But yet you saw the amount of sites they have like that. Watch it again. See the echo go in all different directions. So what they're basically saying is that any coastal community that would have been there at the time is gone. And well, even though it's underwater effectively there, the amount that it ran inland here, 2 miles inland, shows you there was a great dramatic event. And anything that they would find would have had to have gone through that cheese grater, if you will. And here's another little display of it. And again, I don't think it's showing you the ancient coastline. It looks like the current model. Well, they didn't show it again because he was talking. They already showed it 6 times in succession. There's another lady that comes on, and she explains here that they were able to take and use bioluminescence. It's a new method of dating that they've used. Is like, well, when was the last time that this sand sediment and these shells ever saw light, since they were in this core way deep, and they can peg it, and that's how they were able to peg the dates so strictly, much better than carbon dating. But it went fold with some wood and some biological matter they found there, and even though carbon dating's got a wide date to it, it looked to be very much in fold with the way carbon dating gets off at this dating and so on. And then the bioluminescence pegged it, and it goes, yeah, that's accurate as it could be, pretty much. And so again, let's see if it shows it one more time here. There's the inundation. It comes back. And so he just said Israel was bigger in those days. And yeah, the ocean was sucked out so far that you wouldn't have had the coast that you know of today. In fact, this guy was the diver we saw just the very first part of it. And to make his dramatic statement, he's standing here next to a cave that's well known that's up behind him that shows some ancient archaeology that's there in the motherland and in Israel and so on. But just out in front of him, looking the other way, out over that way, you would have been able to see this inundate to the point that he's pretty much at nowadays, and you can barely in the distance see the ocean. But in the ancient of times, you probably wouldn't have been able to see the ocean from where he is right there. Now, it'd be real dramatic to tell you that it washed up and it was so deep and it came all the way to this cave. No, but if there was a cave pretty close to the ancient shore that would have been there, like him looking out and seeing water a few 100 yards away, starting out in the beach, anybody living in that cave would have saw water go over the top of this by many meters all at once, whoosh. Anything and anybody here, any plant, animal down, you just scoured off the surface of it, and all this sand sediment got deposited some 2 miles inland from this situation. See if there's another decent pictorial on this. The best pictorial really was somewhere way back in here, where it actually was showing you the coastline and how far the coastline was off in ancient times versus what they're showing you here. That's one of the guys that was working with it. Nah, I can't find the exact one. So you know what I'm talking about. In fact, there's a picture of the same picture it started with. One of those rare pottery Neolithic submerged sites was excavated at the South Bay of Tel Dor by Asaf Landau and Levi's Joint University of Haifa and San Diego team as part of this PLOS 1 paper. This was supposed to be for environmental changes. To conduct their analysis, the authors of this paper used photogrammetric remote sensing techniques to create a digital model of their study area at Tel Dor, combined with underwater excavation and terrestrial borehole drilling. The dating was locked down using a relatively new radiometric dating technique called optical stimulated luminescence, or OSL. That's what the girl was talking about there. In the co-author Tammy Rittenauer's luminescence laboratory at Utah State University, that was her there, OSL dates the last time quartz sediment was exposed to light. Our project focuses on reconstructing ancient climate and environmental change over the past 12,000 years. Why? Well, that gets you to start it right after the Younger Dryas event, and you can come out of that rather than going through that date and watching the, oh my gosh, look what happened right then. But this still encompasses it because there were 2 spikes to it. The paper's author of Corette, postdoctoral scholar at UC San Diego's SMA, who is studying the sediment cores, said, we never dreamed of finding evidence of a prehistoric tsunami in Israel. You never read the Bible? I'll just make that little joke because really the biblical story, and everybody knows it, and of course the biblicals start out, Abraham was from Ur, and this goes with Sumerians and their connections with the Tigris and Euphrates, and now it makes connections. But all of these ancient cultures have connectives to an ancient flood that probably dates around the time they're starting their situation at. In the future, the researchers hope to do more geophysical research in deeper water and send divers down to test their results and perhaps find evidence of early sediments. There was one point I thought about doing this in life where I dove a whole bunch, was heavy into the fish thing, which you've seen quite a few videos about, and I did 3 more coming into Christmas here and haven't put them out. Really, I did them before Thanksgiving, but at one time I thought about doing this type of evidence looking, but of course my dad, along with other people, kind of let me know, you're going to be in third world countries. There isn't no McDonald's and Taco Bell there, RMTV and stuff like that going on, and you'd be lucky during your lifetime to find something like this. I thought, no, man, no, not if I was able to take a team of people. No, you're never going to get to take a team of people. When do you get this cred where you get to take a team of people? You're lucky if you're along with the people. The research is supported in part by funding from Corette Foundation, which has a grant, and all of these other people that are listed, which you can pause and look at, that's right there. So this is pretty neat, and shows you, again, that ancient place that's like Neptune's Lagoon, but no, Neptune's Lagoon is much bigger. It used to be out much farther, and so that might make understandings of such. And we talked about, talked about Carthage in North Africa and having salt that was inundated in here. You can imagine if it happened to some place like this, just even in a modern depiction with not that big of one, it would wash in and it would ruin their lands. In fact, we're not looking at a kilometer inland, and it went quite 3.5 kilometers inland, so everybody would ruin their land that's around there. They would have gone through a great strife through the problem that was there. like told in the ancient stories of Kronos, who helped to save everybody in situation very much like this. The tales of Deucalion, tales that are in your Bible, tales that work out towards something that happened at this time dating, and then small localized ones that happen in different points, which of course leads in twofold points to your biblical tale. But if a tsunami hit here 50 to 130 foot tall and was rushing inland, anything that would be here right now, like all the buildings that you're seeing up in the more up left part of it, and all the structures, even on the upper land, and the little buildings that are up there on the top part of here, and on that whole place that's there, that whole village. Because see this little bay here like this? It just come in, boom, and wash that and knock it clean. Did you ever watch the tsunami videos where it comes in and it's just mowing over the land? Yeah, well, that's low-laying, flat land, and so there's nothing going up to kind of start the stopping situation, and it just went. And then it tries to find a way back out. Meanwhile, in both ways, scouring the land clean. Well, it ain't really clean, but you get the idea. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll get on to more stories. Got a few more connective to this, well, close to this same area coming up. An ancient shipwreck with ancient copper in it, which is showing a weird destination site or origin site, really, to a land that had, or a place not too far inland from here that actually, at this same dating, seemed to disappear about this same time, but they actually had concrete floors. And yeah, I mean concrete. Like, how old does it go? A couple more too. Peace.